Good morning, everybody. It's Pastor John with another edition of Monday Morning Quarterback. So yesterday we began a new sermon series, Romans 8, the sweetest chapter. It's essentially a sermon series based on the 8th chapter of Paul's letter to the Romans. And it's really, ultimately, it's an exploration of hope. But yesterday we began the series with a little excerpt from Romans 7 to sort of set the stage for what is to come. And we talked about how, Paul keeps talking about he does the things he doesn't want to do and doesn't do the things he wants to do. And he really expresses having sort of a conflicted self. And this is sort of a universal experience. I think we all have, to some degree or another, a conflicted self. The conflict is usually between the person that we aspire to be, the person we want to be, who in our heart, we would like to become, and the person that we actually are, that we don't always live up to our own ideals and standards. And this inner conflict is as old as time. No one is immune. Every saint in history has had to deal with the conflicted self. In the sermon yesterday, I gave a couple of examples: St. John of the Cross, Mother Teresa, the Apostle Paul. But the issue with the conflicted self is that it can, if we're not attentive, it can become a vicious cycle, because we aspire to be a certain thing and then our actions don't measure up. And so we become disappointed in that distance between our aspiration and the reality. Who we really want to be starts to become like a distant dream of the person that we really are. And it can become an emotional and spiritual trap, because what happens is, in frustration between this distance, we start to devalue ourselves, or we have the potential to begin to devalue ourselves as human beings and as children of God. And because of this trap, we beat ourselves up, and essentially think less of ourselves, which then can lead to more self-recrimination, which doesn't really close that gap. Oftentimes it widens it, because we're starting to really feel badly about ourselves. And that leads to despair, which leads to further poor choices, which widens that gap even more. And it becomes a vicious cycle. And the gap between the person we want to be and the person we are continues to grow. And in the sermon, I pointed out yesterday that, when we approach that, when we approach our aspirational self in a legal way, our rules, this is what I must accomplish to have value, when we approach ourselves that way, we're missing the point. Because the law can control, but grace liberates. The law is limited because it can only change our behavior. But grace is limitless because it can change the human heart. So what does this mean for us? Well, first of all, when we struggle with the conflicted self, we must remember we are not alone. Literally every person that's ever lived has had this struggle, has dealt with the conflicted self. Even, as I mentioned earlier, some great saints of the church, St. John of the Cross, Mother Teresa, and many, many others. Even the Apostle Paul dealt with this struggle. So we can get past measuring ourselves, grading ourselves and our spirituality, and spend more time simply experiencing them and experiencing the ebbs and flows of it all, experiencing it, on the highs and the lows, and just sort of be present in that experience. If we can do that, we will find ourselves growing spiritually and emotionally and closing that gap without even consciously trying to do so. So what does a non-scorekeeping spirituality actually look like? Well, it's hard to describe, because if I describe it too detailed, then I've made a law of it, haven't I? So what I would say is it's not law, it's poetry. It's not dogma, it's music. The truth is there, but it's something we experience and share, not something we measure and categorize. This non-score-keeping spirituality is incarnational. That means it's something it's given flesh and blood reality in the life that we live. That shouldn't be surprising since we follow a Savior who we claim was God incarnate. By illustration of this kind of spirituality, I'm going to read a short poem from Rainer Maria Rilke, from Rilke's Book of Hours, which is a fantastic book. I recommend to anyone if you want to have sort of a devotional poetry reading time. It's really a wonderful book. But the poem that I want to read to you goes something like this. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, and then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. That is a non-score-keeping spirituality. Have a wonderful week, my friends. God bless.